The execution was not meant to be merciful. It was meant to be art. The alien broadcasters framed it carefully, filling every holoscreen across the Empire with the image of chained humans dragged onto a platform lit by cruel, sterile lights. The crowd below, a sea of scaled and clawed subjects, roared for blood. To them, this was entertainment. To the humans standing there, stripped of armor, bruised from interrogation, it was a stage upon which their worth as warriors was to be mocked. And yet, in the midst of jeers and chants, one Marine smiled. His name was Staff Sergeant Cole Mercer, a man who had fought in jungles so dense even satellites struggled to map them. He stood taller than the others despite his bonds, his face cut and bloodied, but his eyes unshaken. Around him, his squad tried to steady themselves, their training kicking in, but none could match the eerie calm radiating from him. The aliens had tried to break him with starvation, with pain, with endless questions about tactics and command structures. He had given them nothing except a dry chuckle that unnerved even their seasoned interrogators. Now, as the noose of spectacle tightened, the Marine finally looked alive. The announcer's voice boomed, a guttural snarl, translated into dozens of tongues. It proclaimed victory, superiority, the crushing of what it called Earth's jungle beasts. The crowd cheered, and the cameras zoomed in on Mercer's face, expecting fear. What they captured instead was a smirk that cut across the galaxy like a blade. Billions of viewers leaned closer to their screens, some with satisfaction, others with confusion. As the human did something none of them expected, he laughed. It was not a hysterical laugh, nor one born of madness. It was dry, sharp, edged with the kind of certainty that only a soldier who had stared death in the face could summon. The sound echoed across the platform, unsettling even the executioners. Mercer tilted his head and muttered, just loud enough for the nearest microphone to catch. "You think this ends us? You have no idea what you've just started." The words carried further than the Empire intended. Across colonies, in slave camps, in hidden human outposts, those who heard it felt a spark reignite in their chests. For the first time in years, they heard not submission but defiance. And for the first time, the Empire's carefully crafted narrative of dominance began to fracture. The whip cracked, silencing the moment. One of the guards struck Mercer across the mouth, but even bleeding, he held that same damn smirk. His squad looked at him, drawing strength from the unspoken message. We are not broken. Not now, not ever. And in that instant, the central conflict of their struggle became clear. This was not a war of weapons or numbers. It was a war of will. The Empire had underestimated humanity's capacity to endure, to adapt, to strike back when cornered. In the front row, an alien officer leaned toward another. "Why does he smile?" The officer hissed, unsettled. "He should be begging." The other shrugged, though unease flickered in his eyes. "Perhaps it is madness. Or perhaps he didn't finish." The possibility hung unspoken between them, a thought too dangerous to voice. What if he is not afraid because his people will come? The execution proceeded, but the spectacle was tainted. Each human fell in turn, but their silence screamed louder than the Empire's pomp. Mercer watched, cataloging every face, every comrade, until only he remained. Chains clattered as they dragged him forward. Cameras zoomed in again, desperate to capture fear. Instead, the Marine whispered something that froze even the announcer mid-sentence. "Remember this day," he said, his voice calm, almost conversational. "Because when the jungle comes for you, it won't be lights and cameras. It will be silence, and then it will be death." The executioner raised his weapon, but the words had already traveled. Across the galaxy, rebellion simmered. In human colonies, old soldiers straightened their backs. In alien sectors, allies of the Empire felt the first tremors of doubt. The broadcast meant to demonstrate dominance had instead delivered a message. Humanity did not die quietly. Mercer's mind, even as the blade descended, drifted back to the jungle. He remembered the stifling humidity, the insects that never slept, the way every shadow concealed a predator. He remembered teaching rookies to breathe with the rhythm of the wild, to move unseen, to let the jungle itself become their ally. Those lessons were scars etched into his bones, and now, standing on an alien platform galaxies away, he realized the same truth applied. Humanity was the jungle, dense, unyielding, full of predators waiting to strike. The blow came, but the feed cut abruptly. The Empire wanted no more of his words spreading. Yet the damage was done. Across the stars, whispers of his defiance spread faster than light. The name Cole Mercer, unknown outside military rosters hours before, now became legend. And in the command spires of the Empire, unease grew. For the first time, high-ranking strategists questioned the wisdom of broadcasting executions live. They replayed the footage, analyzing every expression, every word, as if searching for hidden codes. Some insisted it was meaningless bravado. Others argued it was a signal, a warning that Earth's forces had not been destroyed, but were preparing something far worse. In truth, Mercer had no orders, no grand plan whispered into his ear. His defiance was instinct, born of a soldier who understood one thing above all: perception is a weapon. And he had just placed it in humanity's hands. Back in the cell block, guards whispered of how the human had smiled at death. Rumors twisted into myth within hours. Some claimed he had broken free before the feed cut. Others swore his comrades vanished into thin air, spirits of vengeance already haunting the capital. The truth hardly mattered. What mattered was that the Empire's image of invincibility had been cracked. Fear, once their weapon, now turned against them. In the silence after the broadcast, a stillness settled across the galaxy. Humanity had lost soldiers, yes, but what it gained was far more dangerous: resolve. The spark Mercer lit could not be extinguished, and though no one yet knew it, this day would be remembered not as the triumph of the Empire, but as the beginning of its downfall. Cole Mercer's laugh lingered in every replay, every whispered retelling, every clenched fist of a human ready to fight. The Marine had not just faced death, he made death itself look small. And in that act, the central conflict of the coming war crystallized. The Empire believed fear could control humanity. Humanity would prove that fear could be turned against them, wielded like a blade sharper than any forged of steel. The section closed not with a scream, not with despair, but with a single lingering truth that echoed in the silence. Humanity was underestimated, and that mistake would cost the galaxy dearly. Smoke clung to the Marine's memory like a second skin, even as the alien Colosseum's echo of screams bled into silence. Bound to the execution post, he let his eyes fall shut, not in surrender, but to return to the jungles of Earth, where his war had begun and where the Empire had first learned to fear the unseen. The jungle had been alive, not just with insects and birds, but with the pulse of predation. Rain hammered the canopy, thick mud swallowed boots, and shadows warped the line between man and monster. In those shadows, he and his unit had thrived. The alien soldiers, armored and confident in their superiority, had marched boldly into terrain they could not command. They had laughed at the forests, mocked the dripping humidity, and declared themselves untouchable. That laughter had not lasted long. He remembered the first ambush, their squad hidden beneath layers of foliage, rifles wrapped in leaves, breath slowed until their heartbeats felt like whispers. The aliens had moved through in formation, their movements loud, clumsy, predictable. At his signal, the silence of the jungle exploded. Claymores roared, rifles spat fire, and the arrogance of an empire fractured in seconds. He could still see the panic in their eyes, bright and glassy in the beams of falling flares. They hadn't understood how humans could blend into terrain itself, how they could fight as though the jungle was their ally. They had thought technology made them invincible. The jungle had proven otherwise. The Marine opened his eyes, pulled back to the present by the hiss of the execution blade recharging. Another soldier had fallen. Another body twitched at his side. The crowd cheered louder, unaware that every death was kindling, feeding a storm that would not be contained. The Marine's jaw tightened, but his expression remained flat, unreadable. He knew the broadcast was still rolling, the galaxy still watching. He wanted them to see it. The calm, the defiance, the silent, damning promise. From the shadows of the Colosseum's platform, a cluster of alien officers watched closely. Their armor gleamed with imperial insignias, their faces twisted with disdain. One, younger and less experienced, leaned toward his superior. Why does he not beg? Why does he not break? His voice trembled with confusion. The elder officer, scales dull by age, did not answer immediately. He studied the Marine's steady stare, his refusal to give the crowd what it demanded. At last, he muttered, "Because he knows something we do not." His words were quiet, drowned out by the roar of the audience. But the unease that took root in him was not so easily silenced. Another flash of memory surged through the Marine's mind. A night mission, moonlight fractured through branches, fog curling low to the ground. His team had stalked an alien convoy for hours, patient as predators circling wounded prey. The aliens had joked among themselves, mocking the ferals of Earth. When the attack came, it was not an explosion of sound, but a whisper of death. Silenced rifles coughed, one after another, and soldiers fell without cries. By the time the last alien realized the jungle had turned against him, he was already in the Marine's grasp, a knife pressing into the joint of his armor. That prisoner had been the first he'd interrogated. Calm questions, asked in the dark, surrounded by sounds of the night that masked the man's trembling voice. The Marine hadn't needed to shout or threaten. The silence, the stillness of the predator had been enough. The Empire had learned, too late, that humans did not need overwhelming force. They only needed patience and shadows. Back in the Colosseum, the High Commander strutted before the cameras, his voice loud, dripping with self-importance. Behold the fall of predators. The galaxy sees the truth. Humanity is weak, their warriors undone. He raised his staff to the sky, but when his eyes met the Marines again, his words faltered just for a heartbeat. The human's gaze was a mirror, reflecting not fear, but inevitability. The Marine tilted his head slightly, as though studying prey. He did not speak, but the silence pressed harder than any words. The commander turned away too quickly, and the crowd missed the tremor in his tail, the subtle stiffness of his stride. But the galaxy, watching closely, saw it. That seed of doubt, planted live on air, would take root far beyond this arena. The executioners readied their blades again. The younger soldier beside the Marine clenched his jaw, eyes darting toward him, desperate for some anchor. Once again, the Marine turned, slow and deliberate, until their gazes locked. Calm radiated from him like a shield, an unspoken command. Hold. They will remember us. The blade fell. Another life ended. Another body slumped. The crowd screamed with triumph. But somewhere in the distance, beyond alien stars, the sound was heard differently. On Earth, in bunkers hidden beneath ruins, soldiers and civilians alike pressed closer to the screens. They saw not the deaths, but the defiance. They saw not weakness, but strength wrapped in silence. They saw a reason to fight. The High Commander, sensing his moment, thrust his staff high once more. This is the fate of all who oppose the Empire. Humanity will. His words were cut short as the Marine finally moved. Not a grand gesture, not a sudden attack, just the smallest of chuckles, low and dry, carried faintly to the microphone still hovering near his face. The sound froze the Colosseum. The commander's fangs bared. You dare laugh at your end? The Marine's voice came steady, almost bored, but laced with iron. You still don't understand. You think this ends here, but you've already lost. Gasps rippled through the audience, a sound alien to the Empire's Colosseums, where victory was supposed to be absolute. The commander snarled and gestured to the executioners. Silence him. End this. The crowd roared its approval, but beneath that roar, something deeper was shifting. Officers in the stands exchanged uneasy glances. Citizens across the galaxy, watching from the safety of their homes, found themselves unable to dismiss the calm of a man staring into death without flinching. Humanity, scattered but unbroken, felt the spark ignite into flame. The executioners raised their blades again, but before the strike could fall, the broadcast glitched once more. Not a stutter this time, but a blackout. One heartbeat, two, then three. When the feed returned, the Marine was still standing, still bound, but his eyes gleamed with something unshakable. The silence of the galaxy watching was deafening. He lifted his chin, as if speaking not to the commander, not to the Colosseum, but to the billions unseen. His voice cut through the static like a knife. "We are coming." The feed snapped to black. The silence after the blackout spread like a contagion across the galaxy. Billions of screens had gone dark, but the echo of the Marine's words, "We are coming," burned in every ear that had heard them. On Earth, resistance bunkers erupted in whispers, soldiers clutching their weapons as though they had already been called to war. On frontier colonies, enslaved humans stared at their alien masters with a new and dangerous fire in their eyes. Even in the halls of the Empire itself, the phrase lingered like smoke after an explosion, staining every corner of authority with doubt. In the Colosseum, the Marines' calm defiance festered in the minds of the commanders who had once been so certain of their spectacle. The High Commander paced his chambers that night, his tail twitching in agitation. "How can a single man unsettle so much?" he snarled, his claws clicking against the polished metal floor. His advisors murmured reassurances, but he could not shake the image of those unblinking human eyes, staring at death without fear. He had seen soldiers break before. He had seen predators cower when cornered. But this human had not only endured, it had infected others with his calm. The Marine himself sat alone in the holding cell, wrists still bound, blood drying on his uniform from the executions he had been forced to watch. Yet his breathing was steady, almost meditative. He leaned back against the cold wall and closed his eyes, allowing memory to drag him once more into the jungle. It had been a mission of impossible odds. His unit pinned down, ammunition running low, communications severed by alien jammers. The enemy had believed they had crushed them into a corner. The alien commander had even broadcast taunts into the night, promising that their feral little band would be exterminated by dawn. But the Marine had seen opportunity where others saw doom. Darkness, humidity, the sounds of frogs and insects, these were his allies. He had whispered instructions, repositioned his team like shadows flitting between trees, and prepared the trap. The first explosion came just before sunrise, when the aliens had relaxed, certain of victory. The blast swallowed their forward camp, turning laughter into screams. By the time confusion cleared, the Marines were ghosts again, rifles flaring from unexpected angles, blades flashing in the foliage. It had not been a battle. It had been a slaughter. The aliens had realized, too late, that they were not hunting humanity. Humanity was hunting them. The memory faded, and the Marine opened his eyes. The cell was silent, but he knew the guards were watching. Let them see the calm, he thought. Let them learn fear in their bones. Outside the Colosseum, unrest spread like wildfire. Alien citizens who had cheered during the execution now whispered to each other in unease. Was the human bluffing? Or was Earth truly preparing for vengeance? Rumors twisted into legends within hours, painting humanity not as a conquered species, but as predators waiting to strike. The Empire tried to crush the talk with propaganda, but the attempt only amplified it. In every shadow of every star system, someone repeated the words, "We are coming." The High Commander decided the Marine had to be broken. An interrogation was ordered, not with violence. Violence had failed already, but with psychological warfare. The Marine was dragged into a sterile chamber, unshackled only to be chained to the interrogation chair. Bright lights seared his eyes, and across from him sat a sleek alien inquisitor, eyes cold, voice dripping with disdain. "You think you frighten us," the inquisitor said, his tone carefully measured. "But you are one man, one primitive soldier. Humanity is scattered, dying, irrelevant. Your kind will never rise against us." The Marine tilted his head, almost amused. "Funny, that's what the last jungle commander said. right before I cut his throat with his own blade. His voice was dry, calm, and carried a razor's edge. The Inquisitor faltered for half a breath, then pressed on. You cling to myths of your kind's strength, but I have read your files. You bleed like any other creature. You die as easily as any slave. Tell me, Marine, why do you still resist when you know your species cannot win? The Marine leaned forward, the chains clinking faintly. His expression never shifted, but his eyes sharpened, burning with something primal. Because you don't understand what happens when you show humans the abyss. You think fear breaks us. Fear only makes us sharper. He paused, letting the words settle. And you've made all of us afraid. That was your first mistake. The interrogator's mandibles twitched in frustration. He switched tactics, flooding the room with images. Colonies burning, captured humans executed, families enslaved. Look, he hissed. Look at your people. They are crushed, hopeless. They cannot rise. The Marine's jaw tightened, but his voice was steady. You've killed enough of us that we've stopped caring about survival. Now we only care about payback. And trust me, you don't want a species fighting with nothing to lose. Silence hung heavy. The interrogator felt it first, that creeping sensation that the man across from him was not the prisoner, but the predator. For the first time, he lowered his eyes, just slightly, and the Marine noticed. He allowed the faintest smirk to curve across his face. The session ended abruptly. The High Commander raged when told of the outcome, demanding harsher measures. But the Inquisitor, shaken and pale, argued against it. You cannot break him. Every attempt only strengthens the message. The galaxy already believes. Kill him now, and he becomes a martyr. Keep him alive, and he infects even our own ranks with doubt. The High Commander snarled at the dilemma. He had sought to humiliate humanity, to broadcast their fall, and instead he had handed them a weapon more powerful than fleets. Every officer who had watched the execution now replayed that smirk, that calm. Every citizen who had cheered now lay awake at night, wondering if vengeance truly was coming. The Marine, back in his cell, exhaled slowly. He knew the broadcasts were slipping through, that fragments of his words, his presence, were reaching beyond this prison. He did not need to escape, not yet. He only needed to wait. Humanity would come, and when they did, the Empire would not be facing a rebellion. They would be facing extinction. Somewhere deep in the jungle of Earth, hidden bunkers pulsed with life. Resistance commanders, hardened veterans who had fought alongside him, studied maps of the stars. They whispered strategies, sharpened blades, and prepared transports. His words had been their signal. The galaxy thought of him as one man, one prisoner, but his defiance was no longer his alone. It belonged to all of humanity. In the Colosseum shadow, a guard posted outside the Marine's cell shifted uneasily. He stared at the door, imagining those calm eyes staring back through steel and stone. He thought of the words again, repeating in his head until he shivered. We are coming. He wondered, against all reason, if he should resign before it was too late. The Marine, unseen, closed his eyes once more and smiled faintly. The war had already begun. The Empire did not fall in silence. It fell screaming. The first strike came from the dark edge of space, where human ships, pieced together from hidden shipyards and stolen tech, erupted from the void like wolves descending upon an unguarded herd. They moved with terrifying precision. Every missile and kinetic slug aimed not at defenses, but at communications hubs, propaganda towers, and command vessels. Within hours, the Empire's vaunted information web, its lifeblood, was shattered. Entire sectors of its vast dominion went blind, cut off from orders, trembling in uncertainty. And into that confusion poured the whisper the Marine had seeded. We are coming. In his cell, the Marine sat listening to the rumble beneath the floor. The walls shook faintly, the distant thunder of orbital bombardments creeping into the heart of the capital. His guards were restless now, their composure fraying as explosions echoed in the distance. When the door slid open, two soldiers stumbled in, weapons trembling in their hands. They barked orders for him to rise, but their eyes betrayed something else, fear. He stood slowly, almost lazily, letting them see his calm. "You feel that?" he asked, tilting his head at the shuddering walls. "That's not death coming for me. That's death coming for you." His voice was soft, yet cut deeper than any blade. One soldier snapped, jabbing his weapon forward, but the Marine's smirk held him frozen. The second guard swallowed hard, as though realizing too late that the man they had mocked was now the herald of something unstoppable. Neither noticed how quickly he moved. One step, a twist of the chain still hanging from his wrists, and the first guard crumpled, throat crushed. The second hesitated, and that hesitation was fatal. When the Marine straightened again, both lay silent on the floor, and he was free. The corridors beyond were chaos. Sirens wailed, officers shouted contradictory commands, and the once regimented order of the Empire's capital dissolved into panic. As the Marine moved through the carnage, he was invisible not because he hid, but because the fear he had planted consumed everyone's attention. Every alien he passed looked over their shoulder, convinced humanity itself was stalking them. And in a way, it was. At the heart of the capital's command spire, the High Commander stood before a vast screen, watching his fleets burn. Reports screamed of colonies rising in revolt, of garrisons overrun by human insurgents who had once seemed broken. The execution broadcast, once meant as proof of dominance, had become the spark of rebellion. Even his closest advisors whispered now, their confidence gone, their eyes flicking nervously toward the exits. "They are primitives," the commander growled, slamming a clawed fist against the console. "Scattered beasts. This cannot be happening." But even as he said it, the evidence piled higher. Star systems lost, allies abandoning them, supply lines severed. The Empire had built itself on the illusion of inevitability, and once that illusion cracked, the entire structure crumbled. Fear spread faster than fire, and humanity had become its accelerant. The Marine entered the spire not as a conqueror, but as a shadow. He moved past broken soldiers and burning consoles until he reached the great chamber, where the High Commander raged against the inevitable. When the doors hissed open, every eye turned. The Marine stood framed in the smoke, his uniform torn, his expression carved from stone. For a heartbeat, silence reigned. The High Commander's jaw tightened, fury and disbelief warring in his gaze. "You," he spat, voice shaking. "You dare come here to my hall?" The Marine stepped forward, unhurried. "I didn't come here for you," he said calmly. "I came here so you'd see what fear looks like when it walks on two legs." The commander snarled and lunged, claws flashing. But the Marine was not a soldier caught unprepared in a jungle clearing. He was the jungle. Every motion was precise, efficient, inevitable. He sidestepped, seized the commander's wrist, and drove a blade, taken from fallen guard, through the alien's chest. The High Commander staggered, choking on disbelief. His eyes darted wildly, as if searching for an explanation that didn't exist. "Arrogance," the Marine whispered, lowering him to the floor. "That was your first mistake. Thinking humanity would kneel was your last." The commander's body hit the ground with a dull thud. Around the chamber, alien officers froze, staring at the man who now stood alone at the center of their empire's heart. Not one dare move. The Marine looked at them, eyes cold and steady. "Run," he said simply, and they did. Above the capital, the sky burned. Human ships now moved unchallenged, their weapons reducing the once mighty defenses to slag. Ground forces surged through the streets, not an army of conquerors but a tide of vengeance. Every colony that had suffered, every family enslaved, every comrade executed. Their rage marched here now, wrapped in steel and fire. The Marine walked through the chaos, untouched, a figure both mortal and myth. Soldiers saluted as he passed, their eyes shining with the knowledge that his defiance had lit the spark they now carried. He gave no speeches, issued no orders. He didn't need to. The war no longer needed him to fight. It needed him to exist, to remind them all what humanity was capable of when pushed too far. The Empire crumbled not in years, but in days. Systems capitulated, governors fled, fleets surrendered without a fight. Fear had done what no weapon could achieve. It hollowed the empire from within, leaving only ash and shadows. When the last tower of the capital collapsed in flames, the Marine stood on its ruins, watching the horizon. Around him, human banners rose for the first time in centuries, but he did not smile. He simply breathed, steady as ever, as though the war had only confirmed what he had always known, that humanity could never be broken. Reporters and commanders approached, eager for his words, for the line that would echo across the galaxy. He looked at them, then at the stars beyond, where the remnants of the alien fleets fled into the void. His voice was calm, unshaken, final. They thought execution would kill us. All it did was remind us who we are. He paused, letting the silence carry weight. And now the galaxy knows what happens when you make humanity angry. The line spread faster than the broadcasts of his defiance. It became carved into monuments, etched into the hulls of warships, whispered by children on liberated worlds. The galaxy would never forget. The Marine turned from the cameras, from the banners, and walked into the smoke without looking back. The war was over, but vengeance had only begun.